The more and more I look at this chapter and I reread it, and then I look at the leaks of the final chapter that is already out, the more I begin to believe that Aqua-sensei, the author of Oshinoko, gave up on the story. They came to a point somewhere down the road when they were writing either the final arc or prior, or even in these last 5 chapters, came to a point to where they don't care anymore. They don't care about their story. They don't care about Oshinoko, and they just want to wipe their hands with it clean. That's what it feels like to me. Now, obviously, I will never be able to confirm this unless Aqua-sensei themselves talks about this, but it is just, you can tell that there is just some feeling of a lack of disinterest with these final pages, these final chapters of Oshinoko, and it feels fundamentally different than what we got this year with JJK and My Hero Academia and various other series prior to that. There, at the very least, was a glimmer of passion and love poured into those chapters to where you can be like, yeah, it's not a good ending, yeah, it's rushed, but it's like, you can feel that the integrity of the author of what, at the very least, they're writing, that they tried their best, even though it wasn't a good ending, or you believed it wasn't a good ending, they tried. Well, as in this case with Oshinoko, it's more or less, it doesn't feel like it's a rushed ending because, let's say, Shueisha or whatever magazine, is in charge of this, said wrap it up. It more or less feels like this was a conscious decision of Akka to be like, I'm done with Oshinoko, I'm done with this manga, I want to move on to my next work, I don't want to continue working on this anymore, I just have complete disinterest in it. That's what this feels like. It feels like it lacks a soul. It feels like it lacks a hard-coded message that Akka is trying to cohesively tell its audience. Because at this point, it's just such a mixed bag, especially with this chapter. I can't help but just feel disdain and feel like my time has effectively been wasted all of these years reading Oshinoko. And so let's dive head first into this. Before I get grilled, if you like this chapter, that's completely fine, but do hear me out on this, okay? Because I do have some logical points, and actually Nama himself pretty much outlines exactly my points and how I feel about this in a very cohesive way. I'll go over this in a second. But anyways, let's talk about this chapter, okay? So one thing in particular that I am not a big fan of in this chapter, and Nama himself even comments on this in these posts, is that there is new plot points introduced for Kamaki, aka the father of Aqua and Ruby, that was kind of introduced in this chapter to kind of fill in some plot holes and issues that's been in the manga for a while, retroactively, and it more or less showcases the complete failure to develop Kamaki as a final antagonist. It is a complete collapse of the main antagonist, and let's explain. So, Kamaki, as we know, is technically, he is the main villain of the story. He's what kind of set everything into motion. He's kind of the one that started, the original Aqua, his original body, to die and got pushed off the cliff, even though it wasn't Kamaki. Technically, he's the one that kind of forced the ideology on the person that did it. And then what happened to Ai as well, and then various other people that died throughout the series, Kamaki was involved. He was the one that started it all and set the plot in motion. But basically, throughout the entire story of over 120 or so, 130 or so chapters, Kamaki was pretty much non-existent. We didn't really know his identity and what he really looked like until rather recently in the past year and a half or so, and he didn't really get any development. The only thing we ever got was that he was just heavily obsessed on Ai, and that, he just wanted her to always shine like a star. There was really no development or anything like that, and it feels like Akka spent too much time on other elements instead of focusing on the antagonist, which was technically the main premise of the story. What really kicked the story off and gained it a lot of popularity, the villain had literally no development. Before you dive in and say, but he did have development a few chapters ago, with finding out that he was going to kill Ruby and stuff, look, the thing is that prior to that chapter, there was a lot of wishy-washy back and forth with his character. One moment, it looked like he was, his credibility and his image was forever tainted and ruined thanks to the movie that Aqua and Ruby worked on together, and it just, his reputation would forever be destroyed. He wasn't theoretically physically dead, but his reputation and his overall work was dead, so to speak. And it was a win for Aqua and Ruby, and Obviously, the way the story was going, it looked like that would have been a fair conclusion. Obviously, he wouldn't have been maybe locked behind bars, but people would know he would have done it. It would have effectively ruined his reputation in the entire industry, and it would have kind of poked holes in just how certain people can really get away with stuff, despite if the evidence is obviously there. But anyways, besides that, once that happened, you know, we know that Aqua had a conversation with Kamiki, and he was basically talking to his father, like, hey, you know, like, this is what you're doing, this is how awful you've been, etc., making him wake up about what happened and what's been going on with Ruby, what happened with how really was, that she really loved Kamiki and all that. And it seemed like, more or less, before the chapter revealed that he was going to kill Ruby, that it seemed like he was changing, or at the very least, he realized how irredeemable he has been, or how evil he was, or misguided, and he realized that he wanted to answer for his crimes. And so, it seemed like he was going to talk to Nino, and basically say we need to turn ourselves in. I mean, he did say that. He said, hey, let's turn ourselves in. He literally said that to her. Now, obviously, after that, come to find out, you know, he just set things up to really push her, but it seemed like the way Aqua was going is that Kamiki would, you know, put himself in jail. He would potentially seek help or whatever, and even if, let's say, Aqua and Ruby never forgave him, or never saw him again, in his own way, there would have been some form of closure to it, that he wanted to accept that he was wrong to some degree. It wouldn't have been perfect, but that was definitely the direction it seemed like Aqua was going down. Then Nino comes into the picture, and she is, crazy, she stabs Ruby, and it's just like, okay, we have this whole plot point, Ruby's completely fine, but it wasn't really Ruby that was stabbed, it was Akane, and everything's a-okay. And then you have Akane coming in, helping out Aqua and all this. It seems like more or less, you know, the main issues at hand get settled. Then suddenly, after all this happens, Aqua gets a bright idea. It's like, oh yeah, you know, now I'm going to push my, you know, father over the bluff, and I'm going to die with him, and my father's actually evil, he's going to kill Ruby, he's never going to stop, and it's just like, all this stuff that happened was just, like, so, like, quick. It was so rushed. It felt like Aka-sensei didn't really know what to do with the character and how to really settle the plot points with him and how to finish it. And I feel like having the villain more or less checkmated so quickly as well, with just that brief little scheme that Aqua came up with, feels just super unbelievable. I talked about that already in my previous videos of Oshinoko, so I'm not going to get back into that one. But it just, everything about the whole plan of Aqua taking down his father, just no, it's not good. It's not good. You're not going to be able to convince me that that was good. But with that being said, though, here's the thing. So this chapter, this is the latest official chapter that came out, and the next chapter is the finale. This, like I said, retroactively adds in a lot of plot points and tries to settle a lot of plot points that Kamiki was involved in a lot of crime, so to speak. And it's like, this feels like a little bit too late. It's too little too late, because it's like, he's already dead. It doesn't matter anymore, because obviously he's long gone. He was dragged into the bottom of the ocean. His corpse, technically, I'm assuming, wasn't found or whatever. I don't really know. But the thing is that he's dead. And he's involved in all these crimes and stuff. We get a bunch of character attachments, and the media covers it and stuff. It just feels like all this stuff that was just added into this panel feels very wasted. Like, we could have had a whole arc of investigation for this, really diving into this, but it did not happen. Akka just wanted to rush to the finish line, which gives credibility to what I talked about. I feel like Akka reached a certain point where they were done. They were so detached from their manga, they didn't want to write it no more. That's what it really felt like to me. I mean, isn't Akka the same individual that actually went and took a break for Oshinoko to do an Apex tournament? I believe that's the case. Yeah, I believe. It might have been Mingo, but I believe it was Akka that took a break to do Apex. And it's just like, it's very clear that the interest, I'm not saying Akka shouldn't play games or do a tournament, they want to do it, but it really shows that there was some form of disinterest in Oshinoko after a while, that it was slowly dwindling, where they got bored of it. That's what it looks like to me. Anyways, let's get into the other facts of this chapter. So the other thing that a lot of people are talking about is this Kana stuff. So, let me explain why this is bad, okay? Before anyone says, oh, you don't like sad, tragic endings, that's not it. In fact, I think that a tragic ending is definitely unique, and will stick with me for a very long time. Even this ending will stick with me. Maybe not for good reasons, but I will say, regardless if this is just straight booty cheeks of an ending, it is an ending I'm going to think about for a while, because it's like, having a main male character die and actually stay dead is a pretty shocking twist. And that's another thing. I'm led to believe that Aqua's death was more or less just forced in to be a plot twist. Like, for instance, when you think about what set off Oshinoko and what got it popular, was Ai's death. When she died, it got everybody talking about it. It was such a crazy twist that it really changed the dynamic of the manga. And I wonder if Aqua, more or less, intentionally added Aqua's death to get that same reaction from the death of Ai. I wonder. But regardless if that was intentional or not, it falls flat because the entire message of previous arcs is for Aqua to, love himself, to realize that there's more to life than just vengeance and trying to get back at his father, try to move on past his guilt and depression from Ai's death, allow him to grow and have a relationship with those around him, make friends, and eventually a lover, either Akane or Kana, or hell, even Ruby. I know that's a controversial one, but hell, that would have been a lot better than the ending that we are currently getting. And I'll talk about that in a second, but the point is that the entire theme of the story is Aqua trying to get away from all that darkness. And it seemed like that more or less was the direction the story was going. And so this is why it's so jarring that suddenly Aqua's big brain plan is to die with his father. And it's just like, that's not very smart. It's like you found out all about this stuff with, like, you know, Sarina or Ruby recently about her original parents and how she was abandoned and stuff and left and all that. She's always had this feeling of being isolated and lonely, and anyone that she really cherishes just leaves her. She has this feeling, and obviously Aqua is very aware of this. He is extremely aware of Ruby's overall feelings. But despite that, his big brain play was to just die with his father. It's like, bro, you really think that she wants her career and being an idol over you being alive? That's so crazy. That is legitimately so crazy. And it makes the entire message and theme fall so flat trying to save Aqua. Now, I talked about this in my last video. And I said that at the end of the day, when someone is going through stuff and darkness and all that, if they don't reach out a hand, you can't save them. No matter how much you talk to them and you talk to them until you're blue in the face, if they don't reach out and grab your hand, then they're never going to get help. And, you know, I said that Aqua more or less could be like an example of that, but the way it's been handled has just been so messy, it's not good. Because there's many moments where Aqua obviously was reaching out his hand and trying to get help. He realized that, you know, he shouldn't go down this path. He wants to be better. But then suddenly, because the plot dictated it and that, you know, Kamiki needed to die, Aqua needed to die as well. That's what the plot dictated. But on top of that, it makes Crow Girl just seem so worthless as a character and just used as exposition than anything else for the story, because the only role she had was to bring Aqua and Ruby back to life at the beginning of the story, and then that's it. She came into the story just to be exposition. That's literally it. There was literally no other purpose to the character whatsoever. It's just like, why even add her if she really served no purpose? Then on top of that as well, you know, Kana here. Kana really got screwed over badly with this story. Like, it is absolutely insane. I'm not a massive shipper or anything. I don't really care if, like, Aqua would have gotten with Kana, Akane, Ruby, whatever. It ended up alone. Technically, his, you know, OTP was death. But, the point is that he got with no one, okay? And Kana obviously was the main female character that clearly had a lot of feelings for Aqua. Aqua was very aware of this. He manipulated her. He used those feelings that he knew she had against her to be able to get her to do what, you know, he wanted. And more or less, it was incredibly sad, and it's clear that she always wanted to open up and say, I love you to Aqua, even though Aqua was very aware of this, and she never got to say those feelings to him, and it feels like no matter what happened, she's always just been completely destroyed in every single chapter. Anytime there is progression with her, she's torn back down to the very roots, and it's sad because, like, there's many moments within the story that Kana might move on to a different person. She might find another romantic relationship or something, but obviously Aqua brought them back into the story again as like, oh, you know, actually she has feelings for Aqua, and that's it, and that's where the story's going to go. It's legitimately just depressing, because it's like her slapping Aqua's corpse obviously is quite a message, but it falls very flat, because even though this is a promise from the previous chapter of like, oh, I'll slap you if you die, that was never the intention. Kana never wanted to have to slap his corpse if he died, but it does such dissatisfaction, not just to Kana's character, but everyone around. I mean, Miyako, like, you know, slapping her and stuff. There's just so much going on here that is just not good. It feels like every character just does not have a very good conclusion with where the story is going. So let's look at Nama's points for a second before I kind of wrap up the video, or talk about the leaks of next chapter, actually. I think that's very important. So Nama talks about how this is not how you depict the tragedy. There should have been a logical explanation, some reason for audience to get attached, which I agree. There is really no attachment to Aqua's death. It more or less feels like it came out of nowhere. It's just like, why? Why do this? But there was no signs that, frankly, even when the narration tried to show this as sad, I cannot even feel it properly. I agree with that as well. The only sadness I feel is just emptiness to the manga, the fact that it just feels like Aqua wanted to end it. The slap was figuratively one aimed at readers because that's what it feels like. It does feel like the slap is straight up just to the readers instead of actually the characters. It just feels like, yeah, you know, I don't care anymore about the series. Here you go, wake up. That's what it feels like. Then, you know, there is no logical in-universe explanation why would Aqua even commit to this plan when the whole manga is actively trying to save him from the path of revenge. Like I said already, that is true. There's many examples of this, like in the whole theater arc and all of that. You know, when he's getting connections and bonds of people, when he realizes that, you know, the actual person he's been hunting after, his father, might have already been long gone, he started to become a lot happier. So it's just like, it's crazy that everything with the ending contradicts what was set up previously in the story. On top of that, you know, Aqua not selfishly sacrificing himself for revenge and leaving Ruby and his friends behind. That's another big detail. He leaves Ruby behind, and she's just, once again, her very character was that she didn't want to be alone anymore. I mean, she lost her mother, she lost her previous mother, she wanted family, she wanted, you know, stability. But obviously, she doesn't have that anymore, and, you know, I'm just gonna, fun fact here, Aqua doesn't come back next chapter for the leaks. He doesn't. He's dead. So, it's like, it feels really awful. It really craps on Ruby's character as well. Now, also here's the other one. Off-screen deductions related to the revenge side story, which is what I talked about up here, basically with Kamiki and finding out about, you know, the crimes and stuff he committed. It's off-screen, and on top of that, it's just super rushed. It's just like, why wasn't this its own arc? That's exactly what I was just talking about. Then on top of that, you know, he talks about, in general, just the story does not feel good. This is not how you depict the tragedy, and I agree. There is proper ways to do tragedy, but this isn't it. Because it just feels like it was done for the sake of a plot twist, and that's it. Now, talking about the leaks of next chapter, I want to keep this very quick. They're not good. The leaks are not good. So, I guess let's talk about them. The next chapter, more or less, to really summarize it, everybody moves on. They kind of remember Aqua, but their life gets back together, and they move on with their life, which, to be fair, that's human nature to do that, but it really does put a hamper on a lot of the characters, because it's like, oh, so this person that really had such an impact in your life, they just all move on, and it's just like, it doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't really sit right with me. Even as a bittersweet ending, it doesn't sit right, because the one thing in the leaks of the next chapter that really irked me was the final page. And that was, Ruby became like her mother, Ai. She became exactly like her. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, we gotta look at the previous arc, the movie arc that we were just in. Ai was a tortured and sad soul. She had her own mother put glass in her food. She legitimately had a very horrid life. She wasn't loved, and she realized that. She didn't fully understand that, but she knew she wasn't really wanted or loved. And thanks to the tragedy and stuff in her life is what led her to be like she was. She was someone that was very mask-like. She had a facade her entire life, and she wanted to make people happy. She wanted people to smile, and she smiled because that's what people wanted to see. But deep down, she was a broken girl that was extremely sad and depressed, and that's really what it really came down to deep underneath everything. This was showcased as well with the whole conversation that Aqua had with Kamiki. That, you know, I was someone that wasn't just her appearance as an idol. There was so much more to her than that. And so, the final page of the chapter for Oshinoko is Ruby being the exact same thing as her mother. That she continuously looks at Ai, her mother, and looks at Aqua's picture, but she goes out there and smiles even though it's painful, because that's what she is. She lives a life of lies. It's very sad, because Ruby became the very thing that the story tried to say was toxic and bad, and you shouldn't be like. She became that. And it's just like, it tries to depict this message that you can't escape it or whatever, but it's just, it goes against everything that also Aqua wanted as well, because his sister isn't happy. She says that she's happy doing her work, but the whole point of the message of the story is eventually she's not going to be able to be an idol anymore. Once she hits like 28 years old or whatever, she's not going to be able to be an idol anymore. And then she's got to spend the rest of her days till like age 70, 80 or whatever, knowing that she has no mother or brother. It's like, okay, let's sacrifice my family for a brief 5 years of happiness. What? That is not a good message by any freaking means. So, poor Ruby literally has her life in tragedy and sadness. She's alone and lives by herself. It's messed up, man. It's really messed up. It's very disrespectful to the character. Ruby already had very little development as a character, but after that, it really is just not good. It stings, man. That is just a complete tragic conclusion to a character. Not even in a good way. It feels poorly written. Now, speaking of writing, I really do wonder if Aqua and Mingo actually wanted to make a Ruby x Aqua ending. I really do wonder that. Because, hear me out. This is kind of like a theory. It won't be proven unless Aqua and Mingo say it. But if you notice, there was a while there that oshinoko was getting talked about a lot. And it was when the whole plot point of Ruby finding out that, Aqua was, her sensei. Someone she looked up to in the previous life. And there obviously was a whole plot where they potentially could get together and have romantic feelings and all that. It really was leaning heavily in that direction. And ever since, obviously, eventually that didn't happen, it seems like the whole story went on fast-forward mode and it rushed to the conclusion. I am curious if there was some meddling with editors or something in the magazine that basically told Aqua and Mingo, you cannot do this. And then they obviously had to shift gears and focus, and then their interest for the story died. I am curious if that is the direction that the story went because of it. Once again, I don't think it might not be true, but there is some evidence potentially to support that. If you look at the time when Oshinoko started to spiral downward, so to speak, for the manga's writing quality. But yeah, I mean, not good. Once the final chapter comes out, I'll do more of a deep dive and really discuss it, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for watching. May all of you have a fantastic day or night wherever you live. Be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.